Welcome back to the Sportsball Podcast. I am joined by Zach and Andy, the co-hosts this week, and we had a busy week in sports. We're going to be recapping the divisional games in the NFL. We'll go over some minor college football news. The Wolves are still back in the NBA, despite what the NBA refs want to do, and we'll also be discussing Nebraska ball and their failure to bring a team on the road. So we'll go ahead and just kind of jump right in. I mean, big news was the NFL this week. We had a couple of big games, deciding factors for another big game in the future, I guess. But the Ravens and the Chiefs
Pro Bowl. Definitely the Pro Bowl.
We are not discussing anything about the Pro Bowl.
You say that now.
That's all our content's going to be.
If you want to go out of your own way and watch it, be my guest.
I'm just going to keep up with it on ESPN.
Big flag football guy here. So,
sorry, Nate. Go ahead.
But we had first game of the divisional round was the Chiefs and the Ravens, which looked a lot better on paper than it really turned out to be, honestly. Lamar Jackson showed up for about a quarter and a half and then disappeared. Nice. Very impressive magic trick that he did there. I guess next year, maybe. But Chiefs came out with a pretty solid victory. I don't even remember what the score was off the top of my head, but I just kind of put that away from my memory right now. See, 17-10. So it was actually a close game in theory, but if you had watched the game, it was pretty well over by the time the Chiefs were up 14-7, which is a weird sentence to say because, all in all, you're within a touchdown game. You'd think one play is going to do it, but the Ravens repeatedly shot themselves in the foot, and as things tend to go, Mahomes just keeps on keeping on, and turns out Chiefs know how to win, and when it comes to the postseason, knowing how to win and advancing the postseason is pretty important. So, unfortunately, the Ravens, just kind of fell apart, and we'll have to try next season. I mean, they had the number one seed, they had a good season, but they just picked a really bad game to disappear. And I know some of the discourse about the Ravens going into the postseason was that the games that they did lose were games where the offense just kind of sputtered and Lamar couldn't get things going. The defense usually could keep them hanging around, but the offense just didn't have a day. And unfortunately, the Ravens were shut out of the Super Bowl for this year. And the other game was the 49ers and the Lions, which I was incredibly nervous about as my cheering interests were very dynamic throughout the day on Sunday. Once the Chiefs won, as a not very big Chiefs fan, the two options of the Lions and the 49ers were not my favorite either, but the Lions being a fellow NFC North team and the only other NFC North team that hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, I just couldn't quite bring myself to rally behind them. So that was it was quite the game, though. The first half, the Lions absolutely ran away with it, played perfectly. I mean, every pass, every run was, something just breaking off, and they were up, I believe, 24-7 at halftime. But then somehow the 49ers mustered something up by the end of the game, went on a 27-7 run to finish out the second half and ended up beating the Lions 34-31. A couple questionable fourth down calls by Mr. Dan Campbell at the end there. Could have kicked a field goal to tie up the game, but he doesn't believe in kickers from what I've seen. So they ended up losing that game. Didn't want to take it to overtime. They thought they could, which, I mean, there could be discourse there of just going for the win versus trying to tie it up, take it to overtime, especially when your team had next to no momentum in the second half. But yeah, first kick, I'll give it to, but the second time you're in field goal range, clock's getting down there, like, I don't know, give yourself a shot to extend the game, I would think. But 49ers are going to the Super Bowl, and we have an incredibly enticing San Francisco 49ers versus Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl that about, I don't know, 5% of NFL fans are excited for, I'd say. So, I mean, congratulations to those teams. It's, I mean, number 1 seed in the NFC, number 3 seed in the AFC. Both teams, I mean, they got dudes on their team. Christian McCaffrey, pretty good at football. Mahomes and Kelsey, you know, they're pretty good at pitch and catch as well. So, yeah, it was personally, it's I at least have someone to cheer for, or I guess more or less cheer against. I'll be fine if one team wins. I don't know. Doesn't overall move the needle for me though. So I'll pass it over to you guys on your thoughts on the divisional games and the Super Bowl in general. But yeah, overall kind of a disappointing sports weekend from the NFL side of things. So
I'll just say the scriptwriters failed. This is not how it was supposed to be written out. It was supposed to, didn't everybody see that it was supposed to be Baltimore and San Francisco?
According to that, yeah, the logo,
like a newscast
out
or something.
every year. Yeah,
yeah. Whatever. Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo your sentiments, Nate. Not necessarily about the Lions to the degree of from the Viking standpoint, but yeah, it was kind of rough because the first half it was all Lions, and the worst part is we were even as we were texting back and forth. It's as we're watching it, you're sitting there thinking like, well, yeah, it's great they had a great first half, but San Francisco didn't get this far for no reason. Like they didn't just luck in. I mean, they did kind of luck into it if you look at that Packers game, but besides that, you know, they obviously got the number 1 seed for a reason. So, you know, you knew they were going to make halftime adjustments and whatnot, but they just, the Lions just, and then, you know, as for the questionable 4th down calls, you know, I think looking back on it in hindsight, sure, but that's also who Dan Campbell was all year. He was, you know, big balls Dan Campbell. And a lot of times, you know, for them, though, that gamble worked out. I mean, they made it. If anything, Detroit can walk away from these games kind of the Cinderella story of the year, kind of like the Texans in the same manner, where it's just like, I don't think anybody really expected them to get that far, even as they were going through the year, just because I think a lot of Detroit fans will tell you the same thing. It's like, it's Detroit. They're going to let us down somewhere. And unfortunately they did, but you know, getting to the championship game for the conference, at least is something to be said. So and then along with that news, you know, I know this is more coaching carousel, which we might get to later, but Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, said he's staying with them and he wants to try to run it back. So who knows? And then, yeah, as for, you know, I am whatever the 49ers I don't care for, but that's more so it's kind of the same thing as like the Chiefs in the last, you know, 5 years. It's the 49ers have gotten to the Super Bowl a lot. They haven't won since, what was it, 94? Does that sound right? It's been a long while since they've actually won a Super Bowl. So, I mean, I guess, but they keep getting to the Super Bowl and just coming up just short, which it's kind of one of those things where now with the Chiefs, it feels like we've got just the Patriots 2.0. It's the new dynasty. I guess I'd argue if they win on Super Bowl Sunday, they've kind of cemented that they are at that point the dynasty. But we'll see. And then the Ravens was just a disappointment, obviously, just because like I just said, I was really hoping that, you know, the Ravens would get in just because I like to see different teams in the Super Bowl each year. I like the idea of parity in the NFL, and usually there is pretty good, you know, between all the teams, but this year just this is the most white bread Super Bowl I can think of. And I mean, like, I am trying to hype myself up because it's the Super Bowl. It's like the last hurrah of football for a while. I mean, unless, I'm sure we'll watch the UFL, but it's just not quite there yet.
It seems like a very, if I were to pick two teams at the very beginning of the season, it would probably be like these two teams. I wouldn't like it, but it's like, yeah, they're probably, Mahomes and McCaffrey, like, yeah, it's probably going to be up to those two in the Super Bowl. But like,
yeah, exactly. And it's like, cool. There's nothing.
It was very kind of predictable, I guess, in a sense.
It's
inevitable, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know how to call it. Is this like the comfort food version of the Super Bowl? It's like it's going to happen. Like that it's going to deliver, whether that's good or bad. I don't know. I like you said, congrats to those teams for making it. I never played in the NFL, obviously, but I'm sure it's a huge accomplishment. But man, like I said, the script writers got it wrong. Darn you, Taylor Swift, for having to make them switch it in the middle. But I've said my piece. I'll give it to Andy.
Yeah, obviously I will not be congratulating one of these teams on making it to the Super Bowl. If you need help figuring that out, just take a wild guess.
Which one, Andy?
It's the team that has a shade of red.
That doesn't help me.
Yeah, exactly.
For multiple reasons, that doesn't help me.
I do believe, though, that your case works because I think Kansas City is the one wearing red for the Super Bowl. So,
yeah,
spoilers.
Yeah, because it's Vegas is hosting, so I think it's the AFC team is technically the home team this year. Regardless, like I had said last week, that Chiefs-Ravens game, if there was any team that was going to go into Baltimore, the number one seed, that has had that been there, done that mentality and attitude, it was the team that has been in there and done that. And it's just Andy Reid and it's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and the entire Chiefs. And they just, they've had an up and down season with the wide receiver problems. They had, compared to what they've done in the previous seasons to get to the Super Bowl where they are now. This season was just kind of like a meh average, not in terms of great, like not better in terms of what their offense could be. But, you get your chance in the playoffs. You just give yourself a shot and then you just let that experience come through. And, here they are again at their fourth Super Bowl trip in 5 years and absolutely saying have a chance to win their third one in 5 years.
Like the biggest thing to happen to Kansas City is that Kadarius Toney hasn't played.
Yes,
playoffs,
and that that whole thing when they said like, yeah, Kadarius Toney is not going to be play or not going to play because he's hurt, and then he came out on Instagram Live like the next day and saying like, I'm not hurt, the Chiefs are holding me back. Like
that was so funny.
Yeah,
like I saw that as a headline on my phone. I'm just like,
and it's like
this is the funniest thing I'm going to read all weekend.
And it's like you don't have to say that he's hurt to not play him. You can just not play him. Like I don't know why they have to like say that he's out for the game or anything, but
someone needs to explain that to Andy Reid again with those nuggies.
Yeah, with those nuggies. Yes.
With those nuggies.
And that's team politics. I'm not gonna get into because that's not my team that I care about. But regardless, the thing that shocked me the most was the Ravens kind of went away from what they did all season, and that was run the ball. Whether it was Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, Lamar, I mean, they got down early and then they just kind of panicked and kind of went away and got away from what they did that got them to this point the entire season. And, I think it shows that, Kansas City was calm and cool despite not scoring a single point in the second half. I mean, it's kind of, how we talked about Nebraska is teams that played Nebraska is you just sit back, you just wait for the other teams to make the mistakes, and then you just capitalize on those mistakes. They just sat back. They let, their defense with Spagnuolo has been a great defensive coordinator for them this entire season. But, they just, usually you're relying on Mahomes to bail you out and, score you points, get back the lead. And that entire game was just like, our defense is playing well enough. We're just going to sit back, let the Ravens make their mistakes, and we'll just hold our defense on their own. And they enticed Baltimore into a couple of those taunting penalties, those personal fouls. It was I'll call it a fortunate fumble. I mean, they got a very fortunate break that Zay Flowers fumbled right at the 1 yard line and then, into the end zone for a touchback. And that's, Zay Flowers, great wide receiver, but, a couple rookie mistakes there that showed in the biggest moments of the game, getting the personal foul. And then I know that, like, I saw on Twitter after that, like, Matt Rule had tweeted, like, that's why I don't teach guys, like, to dive towards pylons at any point in the end zone. And I know Julian Edelman said that Belichick always preached that you never dive towards the end zone unless it's fourth down. Because if it's a fumble in the end zone, like, it's a, it's whatever or type thing. But, you don't try to do that when you have more downs to gain or anything like that. But, the Ravens just kind of, surprisingly for being how powerful of an offense they were all season, just curled up and choked in the playoffs. And the team that had more experience proved themselves that, they doesn't matter what situation you put them in as underdogs, going into the entire season, that they're going to get back to what they were. And, it sucks to be here in this situation. It's like I told you guys on Sunday when I was texting you that this is just my own personal hell. This past 5 or 6 years that the Chiefs have been on this upward trend and the Broncos have been doing the exact opposite. It's just a living nightmare for me. And they're here again. They're here. I'm just at this point, and I know we'll get to our predictions next week, but right now, I'm leaning Kansas City just because you don't bet against Andy Reid and Mahomes. And it's like the old saying is you don't bet against Tom Brady and Belichick in the playoffs. It's now just turning into you don't bet against Mahomes or Andy Reid in the playoffs. They're going to get there. They're going to do what they do best, and they're going to win games no matter how offensive power like they are or anything like that. But
they definitely picked the right time to turn on the Jets for their offense too.
Mm-hmm.
You watched throughout the whole regular season and the Chiefs offense just looked like they were just lost not half the time, but they just looked like they lost their mojo.
Right.
Outside of Travis Kelce, but it's like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden they get to the playoffs and it's like, oh, right, we're actually good at this. Like,
right.
What?
Yep. And we're transferring powers of the Patriot dynasty, and it's now in just immediate Chiefs dynasty. Like there was no couple-year break for everybody to reset and like who's going to be the next one. It's like, nope, Patriots to Chiefs immediately.
I was really hoping that there wouldn't even just be a passing of the torch. I figured it would just be like, okay, cool. Now teams are like on this even ground to a degree. Like obviously some teams are going to be, better on average, some worse on average, but no, not these guys.
Nope.
I saw a stat too for the Chiefs defense. I don't know how many games back this goes, but I thought this was wild. That they allowed, it was either the postseason or the last like 10 games or something, but they allowed only an average of 4 points in the second half of the games that they played. Which goes back to what you said earlier, where they didn't score anything. They just they played defense and ran clock basically. And it's like it's crazy to me that the Chiefs, a high octane offense, scores nothing in the second half and they win the game.
Yeah,
that really speaks more to like what you said though about the Ravens just not doing anything. They
panicked. And if you look at how if you go back to this season as how, or like historically, is how do teams beat the Chiefs and Andy Reid and Mahomes is you don't give them the ball on offense. You kill as much clock on you as you can on offense. And the Ravens, they want to run high powered offense because you have playmakers like Lamar and, your tight ends of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely and Zay Flowers and all these great wide receiver bursts. But, it's different scoring at a minute 20 versus holding the ball for 7-8 minutes a quarter, just killing clock and, limiting the Chiefs as much time possession as you can. And they got away from what they did all season was running the ball. And I think that's what really killed them the most.
I'd say that was weird because I forget if it was Gus Edwards or Justice Hill, but one of their running backs had like a 15-yard run and then they didn't touch the ball until either like late in the second quarter or the third quarter. And it was an interesting game plan because like you said, you want to keep the ball away from Kansas City and Mahomes. Typically that's usually works out. And
every time the running back
to just give it back to them.
Every time anytime the running backs got the ball this goes for both ways because Detroit did the same thing. It seemed like where they have David Montgomery and then is it Jahmyr Gibbs?
Yeah.
both teams had two great running backs, and they, at least with Detroit, the first half that they leaned on them. It was like, okay, which then you come out with that lead in the second half, and you would think, just run it, just keep running it until you can't. And they didn't do that. It's like, what do you do? And then, back to the Ravens. It's like every time that Gus Edwards or whoever would get the ball, they more the times than not get a pretty good gain or at least good chunk plays. And it's like, and it kind of goes back to like, this goes entirely back to our argument for like the Huskers, where sometimes it's just, I feel like, and I have no idea what it takes to be in an offensive coordinator, obviously. Otherwise I would probably be doing that. But like, I don't understand. Sometimes it's like the simplest things. I feel like just keep doing what works until it doesn't work. Until you can make the defense prove, you can stop the run. I mean, it's two good plays in a row, or sack them in the back, or whatever. Like, right? I get it. It's kind of a chess match where you're trying to throw them off their foot, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes they overthink it.
Yep. And I mean, just look. The Ravens ran the ball 16 total times that entire game, and that's obviously not what they do best. It's just absolutely mind-boggling that they just got away from what they did the most. And it's just the Chiefs ran it 32 times, but Isaiah Pacheco is a great up-and-coming running back. I mean, he's a hard, fast runner. And
Nate, what did you call him in our text group? Did you call him Crazy Legs Pacheco or something?
Spazzy Legs or something, yeah.
Spazzy Legs, yeah.
He makes the ground pay when he runs.
But yeah, I mean, that's just they got away from what they did, and that's what hurt them the most. I mean, they were averaging 156 total yards on the ground a game, which is, why would you get away from that? And then you run it, 68 yards against Kansas City from 16 times. I mean, it's just not, they got away from what they did. They panicked when they got down early. And they did stick to what they did, and that's what cost them it. Transferring that to my thoughts about San Francisco Lions. I mean, we saw almost the exact same game plan that the Lions came out with. Is they had run the ball. They have the weapons to run the ball like they did pretty much towards the end of the years. They looked unstoppable on the run, and it's kind of surprised me at first. I'm like, San Francisco is a pretty good defense, and then all of a sudden you have the Lions just kind of breaking open these huge runs and just gashing San Francisco. I'm like, this is 100% not how I thought this game was going to go. And then it only takes just one momentum play, and then you get the weird Brandon Ayuk off the face mask catch.
Yep.
And in that moment, everything just turned. Because then I think Montgomery fumbled on the next drive. San Francisco scores again, and then they score again and score again. And you're like, and all of a sudden, it's like, if you had left at halftime, like, oh, Detroit's got this. What's funny is one of our friends, Ryan, was flying back from a trip on an airplane. He got on the plane at halftime, 24-7, landed, checked the score of the game, and he's like, how did San Francisco win this game?
Oh, no.
I mean, that's just, it's like one of those moments. It's like all of a sudden you blink and it's like the game is completely turned 180 degrees. And, I think it just comes down to, San Francisco then capitalized on the change in momentum. The defense stepped up in the second half. Detroit, obviously, like Zach said, hindsight's 20/20 on those fourth down plays that Dan Campbell couldn't for. But again, I mean, you can't fault him for what he did, because that's what Detroit's done all year. And it's, as a head coach, if you all of a sudden preach all year that, yes, I trust you guys have to trust me at what we're doing. This is what we're doing. I trust you to make these plays and do these plays all year. And then, you're not just going to abandon that in one game and be like, well, maybe I don't know if that's going to send a message to your guys saying, like, I don't trust you anymore. Like, this is what we need to do in this situation. And most coaches, should kick the field goal. I would have kicked the field goal in that situation if it was Madden, but
at least give yourself a chance to extend the game, especially the last one. Like,
and especially if you give up 6 potential points and all of a sudden that final score is a 3-point win in your favor at the end of the day. But at the same time, I don't fault Dan Campbell for doing it, because that's what he's done all year. That was his philosophy. And Josh Reynolds had some horrific drops there too. That wasn't all on Jared Goff, because I mean, he dropped 2 critical open plays. open catches, I should say. But yeah, that again, Super Bowl is what it is. It's right now. I'm leaning towards Kansas City because I'm not going to bet against Mahomes and the Chiefs. Like it's you stupid to. If I were to put money, I'd take the Chiefs money line right now because I'm sure they're an underdog at this point, and that might flip by the time the Super Bowl happens. But take the easy points right now.
I was going to say, according to ESPN right now, San Francisco, and this is just ESPN. I'm sure other sports books are different, but ESPN has them listed. Has San Francisco listed as 2-point favorites. So
yeah, I easily hammer those points. Take those points if you're the Chiefs. +2. Oh yeah. And if you lose, I mean, you lose. That's what betting is. But I mean, those are easy points, especially since you're betting the Chiefs to win. But yeah, I think with that, unless you guys had any other last second thoughts on our divisional games, some
I had
coaching
an
changes.
nugget the
coaches.
The only NFC quarterback to beat Brock Purdy is none other than Kirk Cousins.
Kirko Bangs.
You mean the guy that's hurt and injured and can't play?
The guy whose Achilles is hanging out with Aaron Rodgers right now, but
it's somewhere.
I hope not, because I'd like Kirk to come back and be normal Kirk, not
just the Achilles, just the Achilles. Kirk's not hanging out, just the Achilles.
Gotcha. Okay, good deal.
Yep. Yeah. So fun fact there. So Vikings pretty much won the Super Bowl.
As much as as excited as we all are for the Super Bowl, very clearly, if it hasn't been noted, you guys want to predict? You guys want to throw a prediction up there, or do we want to wait till next week?
I'll say by score for next week, but right now, like I said, I'm leaning towards the Chiefs because I'm not stupid at this point anymore.
I'm just cheering for Taylor. I'm just cheering for Taylor Swift. So.
I'll go for the Niners. I think Brock Purdy's got some weird voodoo witchcraft going on.
Boo.
And I don't know if anyone's going to beat the Chiefs. I feel like it'll be Kyle Shanahan. I think he'll figure turns out he's actually not bad at coaching in the NFL. So I'll rally behind him.
I'm actually gonna root for. I think it's one of the Batman movies where like the guy's running a kickoff back, and all of a sudden the
field
ground falls.
Oh yeah, Heinz Ward is doing that.
Yeah, that's what I'm voting. That's what I'm banging on. So
and then nobody wins.
Yeah, they have to call off the game, and it's called a tie.
Wouldn't even be upset about it. I mean, like, yeah, didn't want either team to win anyways.
Outside of like the field getting destroyed and like the potential, like, the rest of how that movie goes. But like, would that not be hilarious if something happened to where they'd have to just call off the Super Bowl and it'd be like, yeah, we just have to call it a draw.
Yeah,
and it's just like,
maybe
would
the
be
lights will go out again, like the Ravens that one year.
That would be
the Niners
hilarious.
Yeah.
Or it's called one of those things we had 4 years ago that took the whole world by storm.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I just want the game. I just want the game to come to a pause, not the entire world. Big difference. Man. Big difference. Let's slow our roll there. Holy moly! I can't just say that.
But moving on to a better topic, my God. As I believe Zach mentioned earlier, Ben Johnson is running it back with Detroit. He was, I believe, in the running for Seattle and Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, from the reports, his asking price was pretty high, and teams were a little worried about that. But I mean,
I would understand that.
Yeah.
Detroit just made it to the championship game. His asking price deserves to be high.
Exactly.
Just
and I mean, he had a pretty big hand in that offense, I'd imagine. So
I think even Dan Campbell said that too. He was like, yeah, this is basically, I could be wrong, but I could have sworn at some point Dan Campbell was like, yeah, that's his work. Like, he has a say in it, obviously, he's the head coach, but that's Ben Johnson's offense. And so who was the other one? Oh, Mike McDonald of the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. He did actually end up going I think he went to Seattle.
Yep.
And he now becomes, I think I read this. I thought I saw somewhere he's now the youngest head coach in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they followed that up with big youth movement, I guess, in Seattle. So
that was an interesting hire. After Pete Carroll, I don't know. I didn't expect random guy out of nowhere, but I mean, defensive coordinator for the Ravens. I mean, he's got his accolades and everything. But I was thinking it'd be like Mike Vrabel or even a Belichick or something. That would have been I was really hoping it was going to be Belichick and Carroll working together. I was really, really rooting for that. But
what's crazier to me is that Ben Johnson was supposedly like the top guy for the Commanders.
Mm-hmm.
And then, according to a report, I don't know if this is true. I guess this, I think, was just maybe hearsay, but apparently the folks from the Commanders were on their way to go talk to him, and he had called them or whatever and said, "Yeah, don't bother. I'm staying with Detroit." So they had to turn around. He's like, "Yeah, I want to stay in Detroit." But what's even crazier to me is that the Commanders just got their new GM and everything. They got rid of Dan Snyder, so they got their new owner and whatnot, I think. And then so now they're going through, now everything's on him, like, hey, who are you gonna hire? And like
nobody's coming.
It seems like nobody wants to show up and work for the Commanders, which I would assume then at this point maybe Vrabel takes I don't know. I don't really foresee him going to the Commanders, but
yeah, it'll be an interesting. It's still open, so
yeah, still an opening there.
Yeah, and I don't know who because I saw the Texans offensive coordinator was staying with the Houston, so that's another guy out of the running.
I wonder if those two must be trying to like build their stock up even more and like go on the same run they did next year.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on the same run they did this year, next year, and then build their stock and really, because I don't know, because there's a lot of new head coaches in the NFL this next year though too. So I guess there is a potential if the Eagles really screw it up. I guess they could hire or fire him. So
what? There's no way.
I don't know. The Eagles have been known to cut bait pretty quick. So.
But then the only other news I saw was that the Packers did hire a defensive coordinator. The coach for Boston College. I think that was just a couple hours ago. He was going to be their defensive coordinator up in Green Bay, and I think I saw he's led Boston College to a bowl game 3 out of the past 4 years or something. So I don't know defensively what he brings to the table, but apparently he's got something going for him. So hopefully it's a terrible defense, but
right.
I can't imagine they can get much worse than I think. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, past that, I guess we'll just
NFL.
Yeah, kick it on to college ball. There wasn't a whole lot of college news, really. I think the big one was Iowa finally hired an offensive coordinator, and it might be one of the funniest hires.
I didn't realize this until I read the note just now, and so then I was like, "Who's the OC?" And then I see this is Tim Lester.
Tim Lester out of Western Michigan. And I don't know if he was the play caller or if he had a separate offensive coordinator running things. But his offenses at Western Michigan weren't exactly scintillating.
They also weren't
134 last year.
Yeah, they also weren't tight end or running back packaged heavy. I think he ran more of a spread, which is
if you're 100% what Iowa runs. What are you talking about?
Exactly. If you're Iowa, that is gonna bode well for everybody involved.
It's not like Iowa is known as tight end U or anything like that.
Right. It's not like they have 3 product NFL tight ends right now or anything.
So here's my question then. You guys remember when like Mike Riley was hired for Nebraska and a lot of people went on the idea, me included, I'll admit that. But we went on the idea of, oh, well, he did okay at Oregon State, but he didn't have the resources that Nebraska does. And then we found out that the resources had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Is that I wonder if that's the argument that they're doing here? Like, oh well, Western Michigan isn't Iowa, which it isn't, but like, what? Far be it from me. Again, I will always say this: I'm no expert. I don't claim to be. I just like to talk about it. But this is funny. This is objectively funny to me.
And it is when you consider that we knew about the whole Brian Ferentz thing before the season even started, that like he has to average 25 points like per game to even like consider keeping his job. And then like halfway through the season, we're like, yeah, we're gonna let him go at the end of the year. So they had a good full 2 to 3 months to figure out what to do, and they just didn't do anything.
Well, that we know of.
Well,
They
yeah.
didn't. I mean, they must not have done enough.
Right.
And I'm not trying to
Mhm.
discredit Mr. Lester, but
And
you would think someone with the pedigree of Iowa, especially like where you can argue, say last year, if they had an offense, they could have been a
Right.
very, very good
Yep.
team.
And it's the thing. It's like, it's an attractive job, but it's not an attractive job in terms of the offense that they run, but the terms of like they win. So it's like, how do you convince somebody like, yeah, you win 9 to 10 games a year, but you're doing it running like a 3 tight end set and a running back set, and you're then trying to come in and just like try to figure out a whole new offensive scheme with what you have. Like who on that offense is, when Cade McNamara gets healthy, who can run a spread offense at Iowa? I mean, it's just like Luke Fickell trying to change Wisconsin into an air raid spread offense as well from whatever they've run the past 10, 15 years. But yeah, it is. I agree with you, Zach. A very objectively funny hire. Just because they had this entire time to figure out and they just waited until now.
I think that's why I find it objectively funny, because it's like they fired a warning shot saying, hey, we're firing our offensive coordinator. We've got like 6 months to figure this out. And then they just didn't.
They just didn't.
Now,
You've been
granted,
a coach before.
all of this is going to come back and bite us when he objectively somehow like makes Iowa the number 5 offense in the nation or some shit. It's like, okay, cool.
Iowa's going to look like Oregon next year somehow. And yeah. But
can't wait.
How the cookie crumbles sometimes. It'll be interesting. But that was, I mean, the main college football news. There were some roster updates for Nebraska. I didn't look too much into it, but
some of that.
Biggest piece I took away is Ethan Piper's probably not going to play college ball again. He's not on the roster, which doesn't mean like he's transferring, but I mean just the injury that he's gone through. I know the beat reporters are saying like he's been showing up to like support his team, but like he's still kind of like in a wheelchair type bike thing, and that's must have been a significant enough knee injury that he sustained that it's probably a medical like redshirt retirement or whatever. Kind of like what Henrich did. You have one too many tears or injuries that's like you have to medically retire from the game. And that was probably the biggest piece of the news, is that he's no longer on the roster, but we're just, going off the assumption that he's probably just done with football based from his injuries. With that. And then the other big notable name would have been Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, still on the roster despite suffering the knee injury from last year. So all signs probably points to him coming back healthy next year, as far as we know. I mean, obviously, you still get spring ball, and then you get the second wave of the portal that opens after spring ball. So Nebraska still has some pieces to cut, and I'm sure we're going to see another wave of players leave during that time. Despite what, I mean, some have already left, but a lot of these names I haven't really heard of. But those are just some of the big names that I've seen that have left so far. And I don't know what they have to dwindle it down to. I know they do need to make some cuts though to get like within the scholarship limit of how, but I don't know how many scholarships they still are over right now, but I know they still have to make either some cuts or anything like that. But
I don't think they're terribly far over. I mean, I know they're over, but I don't think they're like massive amounts over. I think I don't think we'll see terribly significant cuts outside of, unless there's a dramatic shift in like tone or something that comes from the coaches or something here. But yeah, I don't think we'll see too much attrition at this point. And
then those are like the big names that I saw from that kind of roster changes of what I've read so far. And then, I've officially signed that Micah Bazooka from Florida, another offensive lineman piece, which now that we know that Ethan Piper's not coming back, he's probably going to be a good either starter or just fill in depth piece that Nebraska needed that we didn't know we needed until now. So
can't go wrong with somebody from Florida.
No.
I mean, Florida has, been pretty good in the past few years. So.
Yep.
I know I wrote the note on here, but I thought this was interesting, and this is kind of why I put it on here. Transferring from Nebraska, but going back, because I know we talked about Michigan and Harbaugh last week, but his strength coach is following him out there to LA, which that alone is like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. But it does introduce the issue of now Moore at Michigan, who officially also did take the job. I don't remember if we knew that at the time yet.
No.
So
no, because you said there was a 7-day waiting period.
Well, that's what I was like, so that's what people were saying is like, oh, they have to wait 7 days per like state law or something, but I guess not. So yeah,
we have the receipts.
Yeah,
well, I said my odds were on Moore getting the job.
I mean, I think everybody kind of knew that, but anyway, so maybe they made an exception. I don't know. Maybe that whole thing was a bunch of crap. I don't know. But anyway,
Zach's just a liar.
Big phony. Anyway, what this kind of made me think of though was that now he's really like he's going to be thrown to the wolves basically, where if he doesn't get a good staff together, people in Michigan are because like Michigan still has a really good roster. Like assumedly, I guess I don't know how many people are coming in recruit wise. I don't know how many people would transfer out, whatever. But like, like he's still got a good roster, so he's got good pieces to work with. But now he's got to build a lot of a staff, at least in theory. I don't know how many people are staying with him outside of the obvious ones that have left with Harbaugh. So it's like, I'm not saying he's going to fail, but it's like, he's really got his work cut out for him. So it should be interesting to see how Michigan does next year. I'm sure we'll see a little bit of a drop off, but I can't imagine it's going to be drastic.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too that because we touched on it last week that we were wondering whenever the period opens, that 30-day window that players can transfer out with the new coach coming in.
Which was why the 7 days I thought was important.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of news, honestly, on that front. So I don't know if the window's open yet or if, having Sharon Moore as the head coach, I think keeps a lot of continuity and at least keeps the interest of some of the guys that are there. I know
and just winning a national championship, I think, is really going to help to keep people there too. Yeah. It's like, hey, guys, we just did that. We can do it again.
Yep.
What's going to be interesting, though, and I know we talked on this last week, but I think Michigan is kind of not the big question mark, but I think they're going to be a bigger question mark because they went from a really, really good team to losing their to at least two of their quarterback and their running back. They have to answer for that somehow, and I'm sure they will. We're sitting here speculating. I'm sure they'll do fine with that, but that's still something that you got to think about. And again, like you just said, I think Sharon Moore is going to do fine. I think he was the shoe-in because he was the interim for at least a chunk of games, but still, being the interim for running somebody else's system and then running your own system, two totally different things. I'm sure he'll be fine, but
it's like Kalen DeBoer. You're following in such massive footsteps from your predecessor of, obviously Harbaugh is still a big name, but, compared to Saban is nothing. But, it's, you have these two new coaches taking over powerhouse programs from their predecessors that were, took programs to heights they haven't been to a while or forever. So it's, I would not be surprised if, we see both of those programs kind of teeter off to a borderline average or anything like that. But it's going to be, college football in general is just going to be interesting next year with,
I was going to say, especially in a year in the Big Ten where we're going to have
new conference alignment, new playoff changes. Everything is just going to be different next year. And it's all going to happen at once. And I'm excited for it. It's going to be exciting. But yeah, I think with that, if we want to transfer to what Zach loves to call the Orange Ball now.
Orange Ball. which is what we're watching. We're all at least keeping up with our Orange Ball games right now.
Yep.
So
Yes.
Yep.
And not sad bowl noises tonight since they swept the Charlotte Hornets in the season series. They won tonight, 117-110. Went 4-0 against the Hornets this year, which if you look at the Hornets, you probably should.
Hey, not all teams can say that.
Not looking at a certain number one Western Conference team right now or anything.
Hey, they've maintained the number one though. I mean, they got it back. So
we're back. Yes.
So that's forgiven.
But the Bulls, lost the last night to the Raptors. So you gives and take. But yeah, that's the Bulls update outside of just the potential trade deadline rumors, whatever. It's really nothing to speculate over about what I think the Bulls. I mean, I have thoughts of what the Bulls should do, but that's mostly because I'm biased about what Alex needs to do at the same time. But
hey, at least you've been honest about it the whole time, though.
Yeah, and I'll jump ship whenever he goes to a new team. I'm not afraid to say that. But we'll pass it to Nate there. I know he has better Wolves updates and some fights to pick with some refs.
Yeah, so it was it had been a rough week. So we had dropped the game to Charlotte, and then we dropped another game to the Spurs. I think it was just a 1-point loss to the Spurs in San Antonio, and things were the wheels were starting to fall off. We were getting a little worried. There was some Mike Conley hadn't played. Some speculation, that just this team might not be able to finish games, and they're going back to their old ways from last year. But they had a massive game that was televised on NBA League Pass only because the NBA doesn't know how to market their product, and they had a big game against the number one at the time, Oklahoma City Thunder. So it was number one versus number two in the West. And despite the NBA refs' best efforts to hand the Timberwolves a loss in Oklahoma City, they still came out on top over the Thunder. A lot of blatant calls, or no calls, I guess. A lot of slapping, a lot of grabbing that was allowed for the Thunder that was called very heavily against the Timberwolves on the other side of the court. And Anthony Edwards came out after the game and said he did not care if he was going to get fined, and he criticized the refs and said that he wasn't sure how they won the game with how the reffing was called, and the league doubled down on it. And the clear dunk that Anthony Edwards had, where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had a nice hand on his forearm, the league doubled down and said that was marginal contact and wouldn't be ruled a foul in their 2-minute report, which is ludicrous. And so for the marginal contact and for the blatant outing of the refs after the game, Anthony Edwards got fined $40,000. So, but Wolves are still back. We're back in first place in the West. We're leading the Mavericks right now, 83-70 going into the fourth quarter. Things are looking good. I think I believe the deadline is like February 4th. So if the Timberwolves are still in first place on or after February 4th, then Chris Finch, the head coach, will be the coach of the All-Star game. So that would be a pretty big accolade. So we're hoping we can kind of finish the next couple games strong here, and yeah, we'll just keep on checking, man.
So this is more of just like a referee point, but I was thinking of this while you were talking about that. And this, just humor me for a second. So do you guys have like yearly reviews for like your job?
Yes.
So
Quarterly,
like in those yearly reviews, one of the questions or one of the sections
paid for that.
Quarterly. Dang, you're getting looked
No,
at.
It might be like twice a year. I can't remember if it's quarterly or not.
More than me. I have one.
I've only worked for 3 years. I just don't. I don't know what I'm doing.
Anyway, but like there's got to be a section there. It's like, hey, like you probably do good work, but like there's always something that you can work on to be better at. Sure, no, not a question. And we take that criticism. We're like, oh, okay, yeah, we need to work on that. I'm pretty sure that being a referee is the one job you can have anywhere, and it's like any criticism is like, no, don't worry. We like somebody somewhere says don't worry, we got this covered. You don't need to worry about it. You're doing fine.
Yep.
Like tapping you on the head, like you're such a good ref. Like, come on now, come on, guys.
Well, do you think they could use like the $40,000 that they're going to make Anthony Edwards pay to, like, I don't know, improve their reffing? But
That's so that the refs can keep betting on the games.
that's fair.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but
yeah, NBA reffing has been rough to say the best this year, and it's a tough job. No, they're human. They're not going to get it perfect, but like,
no, they absolutely are required to get it perfect, Nate. This is a bunch of crap.
That is their job.
If they're at least going to go to the lengths of having a 2-minute review after every game to like look over the fouls and then just say, well, you talked bad about us. We're not going to say that was a foul.
Yeah. So what for the uninitiated, which is hi me, I'm the problem. It's me. What is the 2-minute review? I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, so they like usually the day after the NBA. I don't know who exactly goes over, but some league officials look over the last 2 minutes of every game, or at least where there's close games where there's some controversial calls or no calls, and they do a report that says, oh, if there was a clear missed call here, like it should have been this. And so they try to at least have some transparency and say, hey, they missed it in the moment, but this is what it should have been. So it doesn't like, as far as I know, it doesn't reverse any games, or I think you can appeal if it's bad enough to have something overturned. I don't think anyone's ever done that, but because I want to say Portland had an opportunity to last week against someone. I can't remember exactly, but there's their way to have, like I said, just some transparency and say, hey, we goofed, but we're owning up to it at least.
Well, and I know this is more, I think that was the AAF or whatever it was that was back a few years, and then the XFL took it over. I'm sure the UFL does it too, but like they've started doing that microphone when they're reviewing the play, and then they're basically just explaining what they're seeing to the booth. But I love that. I'm like, that's what you need. That's what you need, is that transparency, I think, in terms of refereeing, because not only do you get the transparency for people that understand the game and are watching it intently, but for people that are just coming into the game, it's like, oh, you still might not understand what the play's called or what exactly happened or why it's called that way, but at least like you're getting a ref saying, oh, I see this contact, or the marginal contact thing. Yeah, like I think they should do that. I think they should keep having these like explanations during refereeing. This whole segment turned into just us talking about refs, but either way, it's like I think that should be something that should be introduced in sports where it can be. Now, granted, for like ones where they challenge in like the NFL, I'd be like, maybe that one doesn't get it just because leave you in suspense, I guess. I don't know, but I don't know, but. I mean, since I'm talking, I will say that the Suns are currently playing. They're tied with as of ESPN app right now, they're tied with the Nets, 67-all in the third quarter. So a lot of game left, but I don't know. The Suns have been an interesting case.
Fire.
They've kind of. They've definitely gone. They've started going up a lot better, but they've dropped a couple games that they definitely shouldn't have, but. It's kind of one of those cases, just like we were talking about Nebraska basketball last week, where sometimes the game is just that way. And like, you can go out and play a good game and run the game plan as your coach said, and everything goes well 80% of the time, which is usually enough to win the game. And that team just somehow is hitting everything they throw up. That's basketball. And sometimes that happens, but I don't know. A lot of game left, so we'll see if the Suns make me happy or if they disappoint me. But outside of that, Andy, I'll let you kind of fill in what you got.
I mean, other than, I think I guess in terms of trade deadline, like we said last week, I think the biggest one so far was just Terry Rozier to the Heat and then Kyle Lowry to the Hornets. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else tries to poach Lowry from the Hornets and see if the Hornets can get something else out of that deal. But a lot of it at this point is just seeing if there's going to be any big names or if there's going to be any teams that are contending or trying to make a push for the playoffs. And, are they going to bulk up and try to trade for some big names just to get some help to get, a solid playoff team going in or try to help them get into the playoffs? I know that at least just from the Bulls, that's just a lot of speculation with the Bulls right now is, is Zach LaVine going to be traded? Is Alex going to be traded? Is a team that's going to want to pony up a draft pick and, some money and another vet to get Alex just for his defensive presence on a playoff contending team? I mean, it's just all swirling right now, and the Bulls very well may just do nothing at the same time. It's kind of what they did last year, and, look where it got them. But would not absolutely be shocked if the Bulls did absolutely nothing either. But at least that's just, from my own personal standpoint of the team that I follow. But, outside of that, I think it's just going to come down to like what teams are in the hunt for the playoffs or want to solidify their playoff presence going forward. Are they going to try to make a trade here within the next week or so and just solidify their team going forward? But yeah, with that, unless we have anything else, we can kind of switch it over to the collegiate form of orange ball.
I just thought this was interesting in the NBA talking trade deadlines.
Right.
I didn't realize this was a thing until I just read it. Apparently, there was speculation that Golden State was going to potentially move on from Draymond and Klay Thompson. And I was like, what?
In Golden State.
Huh?
Draymond has to die a warrior.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But like the one that threw me for the loop was Klay Thompson, and that he's on his last year. But then as of today, they were like, no, that's not going to happen. But more interesting is that the Warriors could look into trading Chris Paul, who just went to them this year. And
nobody wants Chris Paul anymore.
Or, well, it turns out he's old. And it could be either him or Andrew Wiggins. And it's like, oh, okay.
Wiggins had a good year, one good year, and that was it.
Yep.
Yeah,
as they would know from experience.
Andrew Wiggins. Sorry, buddy. Some nostalgia, not that
he
much.
Tries.
So.
He tries.
He does. I think. I hope.
But yeah, as Andy said, moving on to college orange ball.
A lot of upsets this past week. As Nate so proudly
Parity
texted
is
us,
alive and well in the college basketball realm, baby. And I love it.
Nate wanted to kick himself off the podcast for this week because
I think we all had a chance to say that same thing, Andy. Maybe not you so much last week, but him and I definitely had something to say about that last week.
Nate went all in on North Carolina being scary good for basketball, and then they lost to 9-13 Georgia Tech.
I'll eat that one. My bad on me. I think I also praised Nebraska ball too, and that didn't turn out too well.
That one we'll all eat. I know Iowa State pulled one out against Kansas this past Saturday, I believe it was.
Yep.
And then Tennessee got upset this past week as well. So, like Zach said, parity is well and alive in college basketball this year.
Outside of, I think, UConn being the unanimous number one.
Although at the moment, they're only up 37-36 against Providence. So.
I thought you were about to say they're only up 37 points. And I was like, well, that might be a good indicator.
And that Providence Georgetown game on Saturday was a stick of dynamite lit into a very gasoline-filled arena. If you do not know anything about that, Ed Cooley had been the longtime Providence coach for God knows how long. And, there was a lot of reports, receipts that came out saying like, yeah, I'm going to stay at Providence forever, so on and so forth. Left last year amid some personal scandal stuff too. Went to go stayed in the Big East, is now coach of Georgetown. And, Georgetown went to Providence last week. And as you can imagine, walking into your arena that you had been the coach for so long was met with not some hostile. little hostile, not some great fan interaction, if you want to call it that. A lot of F Ed Cooley chants came through the old TV that was not dumped on Fox. So congrats, Fox. Good job giving us what we want. But yeah, Providence pulled that one out. But the Big East is kind of like the Big Ten. I mean, you get into conference play, and you can say this really with any conference, is, you just kind of you eat your power teams alive within conference play. It happens, like, the ACC is doing it. Big 12 certainly doing it. Big 10's doing it. Big East is doing it. I mean, it's just what college basketball is. And especially with, the more games you play in college basketball, and that's like football. I mean, that's all going to change the next year. In the Big Ten, they're holding steady, I think, at 20 conference games with the addition of 18 total teams now. Or is it 20? Either way, I don't know how many teams. Yeah, I don't know how many teams we have anymore.
All the teams.
Essentially, you could play 17 conference games. You can play all 17 opponents and have like 3 repeats if you wanted to do a conference schedule like that. I imagine they won't do that, but that's the sense of what you're looking at.
Give it time.
Yeah.
And news on that, the Big Ten tournament next year is going to be leaving out. It's going up to 15 teams, but by doing that, it's still going to be leaving out the 3 worst teams. So,
rightfully so.
I assume the 3 worst teams.
Yeah, right. I mean, rightfully so. But
it's going to be the bottom 2 in Nebraska.
Oh.
Nebraska just will never They just no. Sorry guys. We might be number 1, but it's not gonna happen this year.
Number 1 in our hearts.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, and then what happened tonight was Northwestern and Purdue went to overtime, and you can go look on Twitter. After I tell you this clip or this stat, you're gonna figure out why Northwestern's coach was ejected at the buzzer of the game that ended in overtime, and he has absolutely every single right to be upset about how this game was officiated tonight between Northwestern and Purdue.
Weird. We're talking about officiating again.
Right.
Weird.
If I told you, the game went to overtime, Purdue won 105-96. High scoring game. You would think that there would be a lot of, chances at both ends for both teams to do really well, right? Foul differential. 31 fouls called against Northwestern. Only 15 for Purdue. Little sus right there, right? Having double as many fouls called against you on the road and not on the home team, home cooking refs, whatever. That led to a total of 46 free throw attempts for Purdue and only a mere 8 free throw attempts for Northwestern.
It's insane.
That is
giving you a nice 38 shot differential between free throws. And you're wondering, how did that game even go to overtime with Purdue shooting 46 shots and still went to overtime, right? Well, Purdue only made 29 of their 46 attempts.
That is bonkers, man.
So, meanwhile, Northwestern went 6 for 8, so they did really well at the line. Purdue did not do well at the line.
Damn well.
Never went to overtime.
Damn well Purdue is shooting free throws for an hour straight
Yep.
tomorrow. All they're gonna be doing.
They took 11 more. Yeah, they took 11 less free throw attempts than they did total shots the entire game. They shot the ball 57 total times from the floor. And that doesn't even count free throws. They had 46 total shots from the free throw line.
That's nuts.
It's an insane stat. I had to look on Twitter. I'm sure somebody's found out the last time that's ever happened, because that's not a very common differential margin in that area for that to happen that often.
Absolutely bonkers.
Big Ten eats itself alive. Purdue's still good, but I think we'll transfer to the sad team that we all thought this is the up and up, and then they absolutely looked like, I think I wrote that on the notes. They are a JV team and or worse on the road in the Big Ten. And that is saying a lot, considering that they are undefeated at home and a powerhouse at home. And then they go on the road and we don't really want to play basketball anymore.
It's just wild to me how we have 2 different teams.
Oh, yeah.
And I know we've talked about it since we started. It's been 2 episodes, but still, we've all talked about it just outside of the podcast. But it's so crazy just how much tougher road games are. And I know that's always a thing in sports. Road games are always tougher because you're playing on their turf. I get that. But like this year, college basketball in general is just different. It's like if you come out of a road game with a win, that right there is like twice the victory if you got it at home. In my head, just crazy.
I saw a stat today that, and this obviously applies to Nebraska because they're like 0-5, 0 whatever they are on the road. Big Ten teams on the road this year in conference play are like 20-46 or something like that. So, it's not just Nebraska that struggles to win on the road. It's like every Big Ten team struggles to win on the road. Between 14, however many teams we have now. You take that's. Yeah, you just think about the conference at whole, and out of all those teams, there's only 20 total wins between those many teams just on the conference, on the road in conference play. So, yeah, it's not just Nebraska; it's every team on the road is just struggling to play. And Nebraska proved that. I thought things were going to be different. They took a 12-2 lead into the first media timeout, and you're like, this is, they're finally. They figured it out on the road. They're going to do it. They're just going to keep playing like that. And then they have one of those classic 10-minute scoring droughts. And then I think at halftime, Maryland was like, they went on a 39-15 like advantage after that point. And I texted a lot of you guys those stats. It's like, Maryland was the worst, 3-point percentage team in conference play this season, and they had like eclipsed that by halftime. So again, just one of those situations where like a team comes out against Nebraska and just does the most bizarre stats that they haven't done all season and just eclipse every one of those by halftime or by the end of the game. But you can't even chalk it up to Maryland shooting really good at home or anything. I think it comes down to just how Nebraska plays defense on the road. Going scoreless on offense is one thing, but letting Maryland, force, I don't even know how many turnovers they had. 18, I think, is what they finished
18,
with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you turn the ball over 18 times on the road. I mean, you are going to not do well in the first place. And it just proved that, Maryland they turned it over and they scored off the turnovers. So it's one thing to turn it over. It's another thing to let up points off the turnovers, and those overtime eventually stack up. And it's same. I mean, all these road losses have all the same similar feels where like you get out rebounded on the offensive board, you turn the ball over so many times, you just don't play defense well enough. And Fred's got to look at that, and something has to change when they travel on the road, their game plan, their prep or whatever, because these are the same common factors that keep coming up in their losses. Is they just get out rebounded, they don't play defense well, they turn the ball over, they look so much sloppier than they did against when they play at home. I mean, you look at the Ohio State game versus the Maryland game, you only turned the ball over 6 times against Ohio State. They pretty much secured that second half win. There was no stress about it. And then, every time they turn the ball over against Maryland, I mean, they would come down and score. It's just, I think, that's another piece of, missing Jawan Gary is he's just another physical presence that's not ranked mass for you. And, I think it's, Nebraska's definitely going to need it these next 3 games. Is if Jawan's healthy enough to play. I mean, you got to try to play him because, you can't keep doing what they're doing. They have Nebraska, or they have number 6 Wisconsin tomorrow night at home, thankfully. So that kind of gives Nebraska a slight
Hopefully
advantage.
it makes a difference. Yeah.
Count in the W right here. Right here.
Yeah, it makes a slight difference. But, after that, you go on the road to play a ranked Illinois team and Northwestern, who just, again, took the number 2 team to overtime again after they already beat Purdue earlier this year. So, I mean, these are quad 1 games that are not going to be easy for Nebraska, especially 2 are on the road. And this is, after that, the schedule does lighten up a little bit, but that's, these are your resume builder games right now. Because after that, there's quad 2 and quad 3 games, which do help to win. But, the tournament selection committee is not going to look at those wins. They're going to look at how'd you do in quad 1 and quad 2, how'd you do on the road.
I feel like we need to go 2 out of 3 in these next 3 games. To have
the thing is, we've shown that we haven't showed up in those road games against quad 2, quad 3
Right.
teams.
And that's
And
you're
that's
going on the road
kinda
against
scary.
quad 1 teams.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's just it's something has to change in the fact of what you do at home versus what you do on the road. Because like Zach said, it's like these are absolutely two different teams that we're watching that are the same team, but two different versions of them. And it's baffling to see just how long they can go without scoring the ball when
Mhm.
they can put up 80 plus against Purdue and Ohio State and these other teams. And then they go on the road. It's like we could barely get to 50 points. A
It's
lot of
almost
that
like
game, I was like,
it's almost like the game plans are different. I know
yeah,
they're not. I can't imagine that. I mean, they are different because it's different teams. But like,
right.
you know what I mean? It's like for home games, it's like, okay, we're gonna do this,
Mhm.
and everything that works really well for Nebraska, they do it there. And then for road games, they're like, everything we just did here, throw that out. It's like
And
weird.
Mhm.
they looked like a team that I've never broken the press. I mean, Maryland pressed the entire game, and that's probably good on their scouting. Is like they knew Nebraska can't handle a lot of pressure, and when that happens, we turn the ball over a lot, which did happen. But at some point, Fred's got to be like, all right, if they're going to keep breaking the press, like fast, like pressing, like this is how we're going to keep breaking the press each time, and it just never really happened. I mean, they had at least one 10-second violation. Couple passes that you get trapped at half court but picking up the ball. I'm like, those are just, at least for me, those were like fundamentals basketball IQ back in grade school of what you're taught. It's like, don't pick up your dribble when you cross half court on a fast break or try to break the press or anything, because then you get trapped and then you can turn the ball over or anything like that. So it just seems like they go on the road and the simple fundamentals just kind of go out the door, which
Mhm.
is super bizarre because this not an easy stretch. And I know Fred during his press conference today, pissed off Fred is probably one of my favorite things because he is a very like calm man in terms
Mhm.
of like he'll get in the refs' faces a lot of times, but like he's not like Fran McCaffrey or any of those coaches that are like beat red from yelling at the refs the entire game. I mean, he'll be he'll just have kind of the same emotion. He's kind of like Tom Izzo on the fact that, Tom Izzo will get mad, but like you can kind of tell when he's stressed and not stressed, but he's not like, beat red after yelling or anything. But his press conference today is like, I really pushed these kids hard. Like they have 3 physical practices. They were, I had like a sheet for load management of how to do this, and I just threw that sheet in the trash.
That's what it was. I was like, I
Yes.
saw somewhere that there was a comment that was made
Yep.
about that, and I couldn't remember what it was, and I didn't want to bring it
Yeah.
up because I forgot.
And
That's what it was.
he's like, we're gonna be physical in practice, and I'm not gonna give them a break. Like any load management, like it's almost like we don't deserve that right now based on how we're playing because we haven't been playing physical enough basketball, which is what we know the team can do because when they play defense, they play it really well and lock down opponents.
Mhm.
And then they just haven't shown that the losses they really show up, but they just haven't been that same team. So that's my Nebraska ball spiel. Again, the only thing about the Wisconsin game is the tick at home, and that's about the only advantage I can give to them right now because it's another top 10 team coming into Lincoln, and it's happened before. It happened last month, or is it this month? It was this month. God, it was already this month, wasn't it? Oh my,
22 days ago.
yeah.
I didn't look. What's like bracketology have us at currently?
I
It
think
has 11 seed
yeah.
in the play-in game against Boise State last I saw.
I think most brackets will have us kind of on one of the last teams in, but not the very last team in right now.
We're barely hanging on to the bubble though.
Yeah.
And next few games are going to determine a lot, I think.
They're about 58, 59 in the net ranking, somewhere in that area. So, I mean, based on how many seats there are, about the field of 65 to 68, I mean, it's, you're sitting right at that edge where, net rankings are one thing, but where you get seated is up to the committee. And, they're certainly going to look at those losses, like, all those losses, you don't play well at up home or not away from home, essentially. And I love reading the Twitter comments of like, if the entire March Madness was held at PBA, Nebraska would be winning the Natty
next year.
Just because that's how well they do at home. But yeah, I mean, you have 3 very tough quad 1 games coming up. Going 1 and 2 of that stretch, I think would be better than over 0-3 for sure. But yeah, I think you got to find a win in one of these next three, no matter who it's against. Because it's quad 1 wins are only going to help you so much, no matter who they're against. If it's a quad 1 win, it's a quad 1 win.
Sure.
Yeah, and those road losses are just, I don't know, baffling because it's
Your team's
it's a little scary
team.
because they seem like they can play together as a team. They play with passion and fire when they're at home, but then they just come out flat on the road, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with the rest of the season. There is a lot of season left. I mean, there's a month plus, but right now is where you want to be hitting your stride, not tripping over yourself.
And I hope they have a February like they did last year. You know, I mean, last year was a lot to like get to 500 in talks of an NIT, but I mean, if you can find that magic and go on that run again like they did at the end of last season, I mean, you're for sure talking about a bid for the tournament. But you know, as it right now, especially with the upcoming schedule, it's a little bleak. And I mean, I don't blame anybody or us for thinking that, just because we've seen this team have its highs and its lows, and when it's low, it's very low at the same time. But yeah, that's again my thoughts about it.
Nebraska basketball, the gift giveth and the gift taketh away.
Yep, we'll keep watching and supporting until the wheels fall off. And
I'm not going to stop watching as much as I hate it.
Like you said, though, but if they go on a run, I mean, it's going to make it all that much more exciting. So.
Yeah, and I mean the potential's there. They're when they play well and they're a good team. It's just they need to. I don't know. Need a kick in the butt when they're on the road or something.
They just need to figure out. Yeah, they need to figure out how to do that on the road. And but again, I think and I know I've already touched on this, and this kind of goes for everything, but it just seems like a bunch of teams are having issues on the road. And I mean, I know that's not really an excuse. Like, no one's going to look at Nebraska and be like, "Well, you had a lot of issues on the road, but so did everybody else." So, but I mean, like, that is something that is to be considered because. In theory, Purdue should have come into PBA and probably just trounced over Nebraska, and they didn't. So, you know, maybe that says more to how Nebraska played. I'm sure it does. But on the other hand, you know, it's just kind of proving that road games, Big Ten or otherwise, are just not there. There are no such things as gimmies unless you're Creighton playing DePaul. So,
My only issue with the road games is that they're not even close.
Yeah, that's the issue.
There's a difference between like, well, they at least showed up and they lost by.
Yeah, they look like we all said it though. Like they look like a completely different team on the road. Whereas at least in the case of Purdue going on the road to Nebraska and losing, they only lost. It came down to the last minute basically before Purdue was like, well, we're done. Yeah.
And besides Rutgers, I mean, that was all the other road losses have not been.
Nebraska's done by like 10 minutes left in the second half. It's like
first half.
What is this?
Yeah, they just it's just those scoring droughts are just they amaze me every single time. It's like how can they just stop?
I don't know if amaze is the word I would use.
Well, it amazes me how bad it is. That's what I mean. It's like how can you just stop scoring and then not score again? But that's
basketball.
That's the
I guess I did say that Creighton. It was DePaul, right? That they beat, or was it?
Yes, they did beat DePaul.
Yeah, they beat them pretty good. You kind of look at the records and you're like, yeah, that was probably going to happen. But
DePaul is not a good basketball team.
It was kind of an exciting first half. Like DePaul was keeping with them for a while there, and I was like, oh, like it was. I think Creighton was winning by like 5, maybe.
I say halftime was a closer score, but then they pulled.
You kind of look at the score at halftime. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I remember looking at the score at halftime, being like, oh, like interesting. Maybe DePaul was that kind of team where they play well, but just nothing like comes to the last few minutes and just everything goes against them, which happens in sports. No, the second half proved that Creighton went on a pretty good run, and then it was it was off for them. So. Yay, the other Nebraska team, I guess.
Yes.
Quick update on college basketball, though. Florida just ousted Kentucky in overtime, 94-91. So at Kentucky as well.
Yeah,
Basketball,
take that,
man.
take that, calamari.
Oh,
Delicious.
that's
Yes, I know his name is Calipari. Just saying. It's just funny.
Yeah, I guess as we wrap things up, only
Mhm.
only other one, major one we haven't really covered is MLB. I don't know too much on the rest of the league, but the Twins traded Jorge Polanco to the Mariners for some pitchers. We got Anthony Desclafani, we got Justin Topa, and a couple of prospects. I think one of them was somewhere in the top 75 of MLB rankings for whatever that's worth. So we got fairly decent haul for unfortunately, Polanco had been with the Twins for, I think, about 13 years. So I think he signed with the Twins in 2010 when he was like 16. And so he's been with the Twins ever since. So that was kind of bittersweet to see him go. But we've got the depth at second base. So there's move on from.
I don't know what I was doing at 16, but it was not playing for a professional baseball team. Holy cow, that's impressive.
Yep.
Dang.
Yep. So that was the main news. Twins got a decent haul, got some prospects, and shored up our pitching a little bit. Nothing. I mean, I don't think it'll make a huge splash, but we got some return for decent player. He's going to be missed, but is the biz. So other than that, I don't
have
know.
Nothing for the Red Sox. They keep letting players sign with other teams. I'm like, okay, this is at this point it's done.
All right. Well, this week we're introducing a new segment, and we're gonna be really unique with it and call it our plays of the week.
Whoa!
And we're gonna I just kind of I didn't really put him in any order, but we're gonna start with Nate because I think his is by far just the funniest in what it is.
Hey refs, we're coming from the top rope this week. So this is the fabled 2-minute report from the league. So they mentioned in the 2-minute report, again, as I said, there was marginal contact on, the dunk that Anthony Edwards had, marginal contact from Gilgeous-Alexander on Anthony Edwards. If you click on that picture to the right, you'll see Gilgeous-Alexander. Hopefully it comes up. Yeah. Just a little bit of apparently marginal contact there. NBA deems that
marginal.
not a foul. So interesting stance by the NBA there, and rather fining Edwards $40,000 for saying that should have been a foul. So that is my play of the week. The Timberwolves still won despite officiating at this level. So
I don't know where you see the foul. It's clearly he's trying to help him dunk the ball. Duh. That's why it wasn't a called foul.
Okay.
The basket's over here, bud.
Yeah, like here, let me guide you into the basket.
That's funny. All right. Moving on. Mine was Lamar's fantastic his wonderful bounce off the helmet, which is the second one that happened. Well, it's technically the first, but the one of two that happened in the NFL games this weekend. He throws it to, I can't remember who that was supposed to go to, bounces off the helmet. Lamar catches it and runs for, I think it was like a 17-yard first down.
Mm-hmm.
Bonkers. Like that. This is where I know, like, as I was watching it, I was like, okay, that I was in my head, I was like, this is where the spark is going to hit it. And they're going to that's going to be the play that gives them that momentum to go and score and, take over the game. That was wrong, but a guy can hope. Really good play though.
I do believe one Heinrich Harburg did also complete a pass to himself this season as well. So not the only star-studded quarterback to do it.
I'm gonna throw it out there and say probably not a great strategy, just because it seems very unlikely that it's gonna work a lot of the time. But
that should have told us about how the rest of the game was gonna go.
But you know what? If coaches can make it to where that becomes a legitimate strategy, I'm all for it. let's take the game of football even more wacky and exciting. I love it. And then Andy's play of the week.
Despite the Bulls losing this game, I do love a good posterized dunk, and it's a DeMar DeRozan over Bruce Brown, and yeah, they still lost, but posterizing dunks are really cool.
You can never go wrong with the good old. I like to call them the Vince Carters, but man,
yes, as
you can
the
never
guy,
go wrong with that.
as I know they shake it off, but like if you get posterized, I just don't feel like how do you come back from that as a player? It's like that guy just like straight up just went over me and just made me look like a little boy. So,
all right, well that was our plays of the week, and
with that, I think we're wrapping up for the week. I think that's about. We've covered the full docket of sports. NHL is on their All-Star break, so we did not cover them. That's the reason why.
Yeah, that's why we didn't talk about hockey.
100% why we didn't cover it. Next week, though,
and not.
Well, we're gonna try. I mean, I know, we're gonna try, but we'll see how that goes.
But yeah, like we had mentioned, Nebraska plays Wisconsin tomorrow night at PBA. I think 7:30 on BTN, and then probably before we get back on, they'll play Illinois on Sunday at 5:30. I believe. I don't know the TV for that one, but two big basketball games coming up before we get to talk again. So tune into those if you want to follow along and have your hearts broken, like good old sports fans that we are, or euphoric joy, depending on which way they go. But
I'm sure this week is
gonna happen.
Turn it around.
Yeah, this is the week. This is it.
I think that's
what's gonna happen.
I think that's all we've got for this week. Thank you all for tuning in. If you have any clips, any sports oddities you want us to talk about, look into for the next week, feel free to reach out to us on our socials at the Sportsball Podcast. And again, just thank you all for listening. And thank you for tuning in to the Sportsball Podcast, your source for sports. And we'll see you next week.